right, so thank you for joining us for Marching into a Tomorrow of Hope. I'm Jamie, the Adult Program Coordinator at the Deerfield Public Library, and I would like to welcome our special guest, Thomas Armstrong, who is a veteran of the early civil rights movement in his native Mississippi. He is a civic education consultant who works with teachers and students to help them learn about the civil rights movement.
One, can you hear me well? Am I okay?
Yep.
Good. Okay. First of all, I'd like to welcome the director of the Deerfield Library, Miss Amy Peterson. Thanks for having me here. And special thanks go out to Miss Jamie Jehan, the Adult Programming Coordinator, for working with me in order to make this part of the event a reality. With all the phone calls, she almost seemed like a family member. Okay, to the audience here tonight, thank you for your presence. I'm thankful to be allowed to tell my story. We're having a few problems with the PowerPoint situation. We should have that ironed out in just a second. There we go. Okay. I'm here today to tell you about some of my civil rights experiences and about my book, Autobiography of a Freedom Writer. And to present also you with a few questions. Now, some of you may ask, why did I write the book? One of the main reasons that I wrote the book was because of my granddaughter. When she was in middle school, she happened to see a documentary at school, Eyes on the Prize, a tremendous documentary about the civil rights movement. And the weekend she got a chance to visit me, and she came to me and said, called me Papa. I said, Papa, I saw you in the, I saw you in the movie. And I had to break a bubble and tell her that it wasn't me. Mrs. Jehan, I can't see you there.
Mm-hmm.
Are we okay?
We're doing good. Yep, looks good.
Oh, thank you very much.
Sure.
My book is the story of my experiences working in the early days of the movement in the state of Mississippi. I revisit thoughts and feelings I had as a teenager about relatives and friends who had been maimed at the hands of the hate-mongering people. I do urge all of you to get the book. It will put this entire speech into its proper context. You may get your copy of the book at Amazon.com, BNN.com, and by contacting me directly, of course. As I was stating about my granddaughter, when she came to me and said, Papa, I saw you in the movie, I told her it wasn't me. She said, well, did you do anything in the civil rights movement? And I said, I did a little bit. And she kept pestering me, you know, and her mother heard about it. I hadn't talked about my civil rights experiences for over 30 years. And my daughter came and said, what did you do? She kept pestering me. My wife heard about it, and then she began to pester me about it. What did you do? Then I had to say a few things, and they in turn said, well, you have to write it down so that, you know, we can understand what you did and know about it. And that was the main catalyst there. I have to give thanks to my co-author, Nellie Bell, who was living in New York at the time. And she happened to be able to get my manuscript in front of the publishers there. And things kind of, you know, kind of ballooned from that point of view. My parents, my dad was a logger and my mom was a housewife. And he hired people from the community to work for him. And according to the Mississippi financial standards, we lived fairly well. We didn't really need for anything, really. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm Thomas Armstrong, raised in South Mississippi in rural Jefferson Davis County. I grew up in an all-Black Negro community known as Lucas, located halfway between two towns, Prentice, Mississippi, and Silver Creek, Mississippi. Before I finished high school, I began to realize that something wasn't right with the condition of Blacks in my community. I went on to attend Tougaloo College in 1958. I'm a husband, father, grandfather, and great-grandfather of a 5-year-old enjoying an active life in retirement. When I was a youngster, I was deemed to be a criminal by Mississippi law, simply because of my beliefs and because of what I stood for: truth, justice, and freedom for all people. I hated race discrimination. And at an early age, I dedicated myself to the struggle of freedom. It was during this time that a young man by the name of Medgar Evers, write it down, he taught me not only how to live, but also how to live a life worthy of dying for. I hope that every one of you here today, no matter where you may live, would examine your conscience and commit yourself to the American struggle to promote and protect the rights of all people. It should be possible for every American of every hue to receive equal service in public establishments. It also should be possible for every American citizen to be able to register to vote. Mrs. G, and today, however painful it may be, I speak of the foot soldiers of the movement, the little people that Medgar Evers, my mentor, would call them. As we celebrate the civil rights movement, we must never forget the little people. On occasion, my father wore the mask. It was the mask that the famous poet Paul Laurence Dunbar spoke of in his poem, The Mask. At times, as a child, I could see the hurt in my father's face when he had to wear that mask in order to protect and provide for his family. I could see the pain when he had to step off the sidewalk as he approached two or more Caucasians, as they passed, sometimes silently. I could see tears falling from his eyes, and sometimes as I walked with him in Mississippi town, it was as if I knew how he felt. If I brought it to his attention, he would simply say, "That's just the way it is, but you can do better." The humiliation, abuse, and disparity was not caused by something that he did wrong. He lived those horrible experiences simply because he was born Black. For you see, if a Black child was born in the South, he or she was doomed to abuse. If that child even attempted to vote, he could just disappear, be dragged away, tortured, even lynched. Certainly, if a young Black man looked at the wrong woman, he could almost expect the same treatment. Now, I could feel my father's pain. My path is now chosen. Now I must fight for the rights of my father. While conversing with my mother about the system of abuse we lived in, I just wanted to hurt somebody. However, a mother's will prevailed. Mother retrieved an old picture of her mother, handed it to me, and simply said, "You hate her too?" You see, her mother's father was Caucasian, and her mother was half Caucasian. My grandmother appeared to be white. That picture alone provided me with a new attitude. Many grand interracial relationships have been lost simply because of an evil Jim Crow system. No matter how much a black and white person loved each other, no reality would be entertained. An idea such as marriage was not even thought of. My mother didn't, and no other mother would, give her blessings to a son in such situation because she knew that she would be sending him to his death. And the couple knew that they would most likely be killed only because they expressed true love for each other. Now that was Mississippi. That was Mississippi. It was in 1906. It was in 1906 that Bertha and Jonas Johnson had graduated from Tuskegee Institute, where they met and founded Prentice Normal and Industrial Institute with the help of Julius Rosenwald of the Sears and Roebuck Catalog Establishment and Corporation, who provided like-kind grants for the purpose of building schools for blacks in the South. Johnson's portion of the needed funds came from the community, whites as well as blacks. He informed whites that if they provided donation for the building of the school, they could improve their profit margin being generated by their sharecroppers. He was very successful. The whites of the area bought into that. Now, it was around this time that I stopped at a Dairy King ice cream parlor in my hometown. I was 13 years of age. You see, I loved the blues, and we had an old Philco radio. And I used to take that radio and put it in the bed with me and listen to Randy's Record Shop out of Nashville, Tennessee. One night I listened too long, and I missed the school bus to school. School was 5 miles away. I missed that bus. However, I walked to the center of my Lucas community, and I got a ride into Prentice, Mississippi, where the high school, Prentice Institute, was located. The gentleman dropped me off in front of an ice cream parlor. You see, in Mississippi at 9:30 in the morning, it's already hot. And so I wanted an ice cream cone. As I walked up to the window with my books, the gentleman behind the glass, so what can I do for you? I said, I'd like a vanilla ice cream cone, please. He said, what's the matter, boy? Can't you read? I said, of course I can read. I'm reading these books that I have here. He said, well, read that sign up there. And that sign said, white only. So he took his thumb and pointed around to the side window and said, go around there. As I walked around there, near the window was a 50-gallon metal drum half filled with garbage and swarming with flies. So I immediately just turned and walked the other 1/4 mile to my high school. My cousin was the principal there. And as I sat in his office waiting for him to come out, he did and said, what's the problem? And I told him of my experience that morning. He said, well, just don't worry about it too much. We will not frequent that establishment anymore. That was my first recognition with overt segregation. And when I walked up to that window and said, may I have an ice cream cone, please? Segregation smacked me dead in the face. The man behind the window, I just couldn't understand his attitude at that particular time. Now I knew perfectly how my father felt. He, for the safety and for safety's sake, had to put on that darn mask. I couldn't stand it for a long period of time. After leaving my small community of Lucas, Mississippi, I enrolled in Tougaloo College, where I had the opportunity to meet several times with Dr. Martin Luther King. He often wanted to know what we were doing in terms of movement struggles. He would offer all of the encouragement that he could. However, along with the academia, Tougaloo College increased my ability to think for myself. It taught me that freedom was around the corner, but it wasn't looking for me. I had to go find it. So faced with all of this confusion, My life was like reaching for the stars, like reaching for that next rung on the ladder, but not being able to grasp it, like walking in total darkness in a blinding rainstorm, knowing that a 100-foot cliff was nearby. Was the next step going to be my last step? But I had to help change things. I had to help change things. Well, that whole situation totally reminded me of the rules and regulations and laws of 1705 that were put into place in order to regulate the lives of slaves. They were known as slave codes. Slave masters were then allowed to treat slaves any way they wished without fear of retribution. Then the Civil War occurred. There was no doubt that slavery was at the heart of the Civil War, but that's a long story for another day. Those laws were updated in 1865 and in 1866 after the Civil War. The updates consisted mainly of changing the word slave to Negro. The new law were intended to hinder and block black freedmen from voting and had the effect of restricting African American freedom and of compelling them to work in a labor economy based on low wages and debt. Some of the consequences of those laws remain in effect up to the passage of the Civil Rights Bill of 1964. Get off the sidewalk. The two or more occasions approach. Sketch your foot on a white piece of paper and give it to the clerk before you purchase shoes. Blacks had to wait in line until whites were served. Then the clerk took their money. Couldn't sit on the front of the bus. Interracial marriages were banned. Could not testify against Caucasians in court. On the lawn of the old courthouse in my home county was a water fountain with a colored sign attached. If you were black and drank from the water fountain with the white sign attached, you were subjected to ridicule at the very least. Substandard books was given to my high school, along with substandard equipment, while the white school was given all new books and equipment. My high school early years, we students had to use our experiments. With our experiments, we had to use a bottle with alcohol and a rope wick. My students at nearby high school had Bunsen burners and pipe tin fuel. At the bus station in my hometown, there was a waiting room for colors, and there was one for white. And as integration became more real, the town closed both waiting rooms, and one had to board the bus and get off the bus just north of town, outside on Main Street, rain or sunshine. Even though I participated in the movement of the 1960s, I was being watched. I was being watched by the Mississippi State Sovereignty Commission. The State Sovereignty Commission was a spy agency. It was created in 1956 and sponsored and directed by the governor of the state of Mississippi. The state of Mississippi State Sovereignty Commission watched every move that anyone made using state compensated investigators. They tried everything within their power to stop the black vote, stop integration, keep tabs on all outside influences coming into the state of Mississippi, and to identify all who were sympathetic to the cause of freedom. Information gathered was passed on to the state police, the White Citizen Council, another racist organization, and subsequently to the Klan, whose sole purpose was to intimidate and harass. Ladies and gentlemen, there are some scholars and some civil rights veterans who would suggest to you that Mississippi blacks did not do anything to help themselves move forward toward freedom until the Freedom Riders and other organizations came into the state. I, as a freedom rider, submit to you that our fight for freedom began to intensify with the return of our soldiers beginning with World War I and II. During World War II, two young men from my hometown, Curtis Hooker and Avery Tony, dodged many bullets, became war-weary soldiers in the Battle of the Bulge. They fought battles throughout the frozen Ardennes forest in the mountainous region of Belgium, in France, and Luxembourg in the dead of winter. This battle, the Battle of the Bulge, was the costliest action fought by the U.S. Army, which suffered over 100,000 casualties. Well, Curtis and Avery survived. They survived Normandy in northern France. Curtis Hooker survived 4 other major battles, and Avery Tony survived 6 battles, including Rhineland Battle and the Battle of Central Europe. And still, they came back to Mississippi and could not vote, and was ridiculed throughout the attempted processes. We in our Black community of Lucas, we knew what Avery and Curtis did. For others, we knew that the treatment that they received from Mississippi and the USA was not fair to them. However, they brought the courage that they maintained in the military service. They brought it back to us and mandated that we use it. We took that courage and used it when the right opportunity presented itself. We used it to march into the tomorrow of a better world. Perhaps the greatest factor involved in my decision to participate in the civil rights movement was a gentleman by the name of Medgar Evers. In the spring of 1959, I happened to visit a mass meeting at which I heard Medgar Evers stress the need for Tuckerton College students to become involved in voter registration drives. I listened to Medgar provide concrete evidence of the conscious efforts of city clerks across the state to strike eligible Black voters from the rolls. I learned that in my native county, Jefferson Davis County, the city clerk has struck 1,000 otherwise eligible Black voters from the rolls. Some of those were family members. So after the meeting, I was inspired to become involved in the movement. Medgar Evers was one of the reasons for the many successes of the Mississippi civil rights movement. He was the Mississippi State Field Secretary for the NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. He became a martyr of the civil rights movement. It can be said that Medgar was the real reason that I became involved, because I responded to his request to help voter registration work. Medgar gave his life in the battle of freedom. He was a civil rights activist, born July 2, 1925 in Decatur, Mississippi. He fought in both France and Germany during World War II. He received a Purple Heart, graduated from Alcorn College. He was the bravest man that I had ever known. Sometimes I tell my dad, I believe Medgar is, he's braver than you, Dad. He said, yeah, maybe so, but he doesn't have to live with you every day. So Medgar Evers, he never took credit for successes of the movement. He would always say, it wasn't me. It was the little people against the system. Medgar Evers was the one that marked my path. On June 12, 1963, excuse me, Medgar was shot and killed 17 days before his 38th birthday. It was because he wanted equality for Blacks that Medgar Evers was killed. Today, an airport, a post office, federal post office, and a 689-foot U.S. Navy ship honors his name. The little people, as Medgar called us. Now, when you hear me use the word power, I wish you would realize that power is your ability to act or produce an effect, your ability to produce political control or influence. So at the next election, you can exert your power through the vote, through the vote. What was done to many of the little people of the world and the country was a travesty. While it is true that the story of the great leaders of the movement has been presented to the public, efforts of the least of these of the movement, even to this day, languish in invisibility. Little people, you may or may not have heard of the names: Jesse Harris, Joan Trumpow, MacArthur Cotton, Dory Ladner, Ann Moody, Betty Pooh, Jimmy Travis, Viola Lauso, James Taney, Andrew Goodman, Michael Sherney, and countless others for soldiers, risked their homes, their lives, and the lives of their family in order to develop a movement to make America a better place. They had no legal protection. They were mostly from the South, branching out into a sea of hate. They rearranged their priorities. No longer was family number one. Freedom now took that position. Those little people, the sharecroppers, tenant farmers, domestic, teachers, students, small business people of the communities of the South, they were the history makers. They were people just like you, 70,000 strong, who made the civil rights movement a success. They had power. There was something unique about that group, though. Most of the group was composed of young people, 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, as young as 14 years of age, who were daily on the battlefield for freedom. The little people was about to speak. Now, when I spoke of these things to family again, that reply remained the same. That's just the way it is. But you can do better. They didn't know how we could do better, but they knew we'd find a way to make things better. The little people were now speaking. Ladies and gentlemen, we stand on the shoulders of a great man. A man known as Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. was born Michael King Jr. on January the 5th, 1929. He was the middle child of Michael King Sr. and Alberta William King. It was during a visit to Germany by his family. Michael King Sr. became so impressed with the spiritual activist Martin Luther that he eventually changed both of their names to Martin Luther King. Now, the average textbook devote much to Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., and without question, King was very important, presenting the civil rights movement as largely his creation does not do justice to the struggle in Mississippi, though. This distorted memory provides little inspiration for young people today, since it gives little attention to the crucial action by ordinary people. Now, that was another reason for my book. We now know that many FBI surveillance records, written and audio records, also recorded concerning Martin Luther King, are currently held in the National Archives, but are sealed from public access until 2027. The Martin Luther King assassination has never been totally revealed. Revealed. After King's assassination, 3 governmental entities, CONTELPRO, the FBI program, Operation Chaos, the CIA program, and Operation Lantern Spike, the Army intelligence operation, all worked to prevent the rise of a Black Messiah and replace Martin Luther King Jr. with a clean, quote unquote, Negro. Today, many believe that some already released documents from the Merkin file connected to the King assassination. They believe that there is some connection between Martin Luther King's assassination and the assassination of John F. Kennedy. There are only 2 other people in American history that have national holiday in their honor. George Washington and Christopher Columbus. Martin Luther King Jr. is the only native-born Mississippi citizen to have a national holiday in his honor. King wasn't the only person to die at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis. Lorraine Bailey, wife of the owner of the motel, she was also the switchboard operator. After hearing of King's death on the balcony, she collapsed with a heart attack, from which she died later. Ladies and gentlemen, as you remember Dr. King, please don't forget your own worth, your own power. You have the power. When I joined the movement, I had heard of many civil rights marchers. Of the several that I knew about, there was George Lee, Reverend George Lee of Belzona, Mississippi, one of the first Black registered voters in Humphreys County, Mississippi. He used his pulpit and printing press to urge others to vote. The great white officials of Belzoni offered Lee protection on the condition that he end his voter registration efforts, but Lee refused and was murdered. August 13, 1955. Just 15 days before the murder of Emmett Till on August 28, 55, and just 30 miles from my home, a Black civil rights worker, Lamar Smith, was killed after urging others to vote. He was shot to death on Brookhaven, Mississippi courthouse lawn. A grand jury refused to indict the three men who were charged with the slaying, even though one of the accused was seen leaving the scene of the shooting covered in blood. There were many others, even if you do not include Blacks who were lynched, beaten, or shot because they posed a threat to the segregated South. To the adults here today who voted in the last election, during the 1950s, people were being killed for trying to do exactly what you did, register to vote. People were killed for trying to help people register to vote. In Mississippi, people were killed just for talking to each other about voting. Yet, even with all of that, it remains our responsibility to vote, to vote. It was known that in 1960 in Mississippi, less than 2% of Black was registered voters. In Humphrey County, because of intimidation and harassment, there was not one registered Black voter in the county. Working out of Tuckahoe College as registration organizers, mostly in groups of twos, we were sent to many counties in Mississippi to begin the very dangerous and difficult task. And that task was to teach Blacks the Mississippi voter registration process. The instruction that we received about the gravity of our situation was only stay alive and try not to get arrested. Stay alive and try not to get arrested. Mostly mega Everest would meet with ministers of the community and arrange for voter registration classes to be held in the area. In those classes, we would review the Mississippi State Constitution because one of the qualifications to vote was to explain a section of that Constitution to the satisfaction of the circuit clerk, which you could never do unless he wanted it done. If the clerk was having a good day, he might ask you how many marbles in a 1 gallon jar, or he just may ask you how many feathers on a chicken, who came first, God or Jesus, and all kind of questions such as that. Sometime, one of my movement partners and I would leave school to go to college on Saturday mornings to participate in voter registration classes And we would return late Sunday nights. Sometime when we returned, we would ask the janitors to lock us in the science lab on Sunday nights, where we studied until the building opened on Monday morning. The janitors were janitors, security guards, and friends. Those were interesting times. Even after all of these years, it is still painful to speak of those experiences. But those of you who voted in the last election, no longer would it be enough for you to say I voted, or just to wear that little I voted sticker that they place on your lapel. The question was once, did you take someone to the polls with you? That question now becomes a statement. Take your neighbors to the polls with you. It's difficult for me to find ways to express to you the sincerity of our plight, other than to say, too many people have died for your right to vote, for your right to vote. We should not be about the business of diluting our voter right laws. We need to strengthen them so that we can promote a healthy democracy built on the promise of America. The right to vote should be free and without restriction to all Americans. It is un-American for anyone to try and place restriction on the right to vote. They just don't love America. They don't understand America's real philosophy. You know, the history books should get the facts straight. Most of them only tell half the story. You hardly hear of efforts of some of the individuals who attempted to enroll in all-white Mississippi institutions during the 60s. There were others, but some of those who fought to integrate Mississippi higher education institution were mega efforts. June 1954, the University of Mississippi Law School, he was denied simply because of the color of his skin. Clyde Kennard in 1957 was denied to enter the Mississippi Southern College, which later became the University of Southern Mississippi. He was denied because of the color of his skin, and he was thrown into prison. Clennon King was an instructor at all-black Alcorn College in Mississippi. He attempted to enter the University of Mississippi in June of 1958. He was denied because of the color of his skin and thrown into a mental institution. You had to be crazy to try to enter an all-white institution in Mississippi. In 1961, yours truly attempted to enter all-whites Millsaps College. I was denied because of the color of my skin. Students at all-white Millsap College protested against their institution, trying to get me admitted. James Meredith, you probably have heard of him. He applied University of Mississippi in 1961. He was denied. However, in 1962, he was admitted, along with the help of 350 federal marshals. A riot ensued, and 2 people were killed. However, with the admittance of James Meredith, 2 students, Tougaloo students, followed closely behind and were allowed to enter the University of Mississippi also in 1962. Millsaps College, where I attempted to enter, had a unique philosophy, and we still don't understand it. Eli Harstetter from Goshen, Indiana. He was my roommate, and he was also a Caucasian. You see, there had been Caucasian students attending the all-black Tougaloo College since 1860s. Okay, so Eli Harstetter In a discussion that we had, since I had been refused admittance to Millsap College, we wondered what would happen if Eli went down there to try to be enrolled. Well, they denied him too. They denied him simply because he attended a Black institution, a Black institution. So we do encourage historians to do a little better tweaking of their work. Our children should be educated, not incarcerated. Our schools have not done enough to help. There's something wrong when our students do a bang up good job with their various school projects and get a bronze simulated medal and a red, white, and blue ribbon for their efforts, while other students make 100 hoops or free throws and get a 4-year scholarship. Something is wrong with that picture. We need to revisit it. What will your role be in finding a solution? Some of you have heard of a young man by the name of Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan was known to the public as being a folk singer. Well, Bob actually came to Mississippi. He visited Mississippi several times during the Civil Rights Movement era. In fact, I personally knew him as a teenager. He was 17 years old at the time. And we met at Tougaloo College. Bob Dylan came down to Mississippi in the Greenwood, Mississippi area and gave guitar lessons to young Blacks. And the music gave us courage. And we were so happy to have Bob Dylan and hundreds of other entertainers, national known entertainers, to visit us and take part in our demonstrations. Music gave us courage, as I said. We had many freedom songs to fall back on. One of my favorite ones, Precious Lord, Take My Hand. When I was in the midst of fearful, hateful mobs, somehow that song would come to me. And I was serious about it at the same time because I really did want the Lord to take my hand and lead me out of those situations. It was on Friday nights that a few students of Tougaloo College would meet at the chaplain's home and discuss planned protests for the coming weekend. On Sunday mornings, we would dress up and go downtown to Jackson, Mississippi to visit one of his all-white churches. We knew that we may not live to see Monday morning. You here today, when you attend your church service this Sunday, please be mindful that it was pressure for the inclusion of Blacks in worship by the likes of Tougaloo student Catherine Hanna, second from left, Eli Hoisted, Dolores Dunlap, Julie Zahl, and yours truly, second from right, and others that push some church denomination to change their policy for Blacks to worship. Before many of our protest efforts, we gathered together in song and prayer. 2 songs that we always sing, We Shall Overcome, and This May Be the Last Time. The year 1961 is the year mostly associated with the Freedom Riders. However, in 1944, there was a young Black lady by the name of Irene Morgan who sat at the front of the bus and refused to give up her seat to a white person. She was arrested. She wasn't the only one. There was Claudette Colgan, Sarah Louise Keyes, Aurelia Browder, Susan McDonald, Mary Louise Smith, all most forgotten women of the movement. And then there came Rosa Parks, December 1955 in Montgomery, Alabama. She refused to obey the driver's order to give her first seat in the colored section of a white passenger after the white section was filled. Now, Irene Morgan in 1946 won her case under the Supreme Court. Her case, Morgan versus Commonwealth of Virginia, was heard by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1946. She won. However, the South said they didn't care what the Supreme Court did. Okay, they were going to continue their custom. In 1947, a year later, a young man by the name of James Farmer, who was a postgraduate student at the University of Chicago, and one of his friends, James Peck, saw that the South were not going to change their custom. So they created something known as the Journey of Reconciliation, which became known as a freedom rider group. On April 9, 1947, an interracial group left Washington, D.C. and traveled through the Upper South. Okay, what they would do as they came through Virginia and North Carolina, Tennessee, and Kentucky, there were 6 whites and 7 blacks. The white freedom riders would get off the bus and go into the black waiting room, and the black freedom riders would get off and go into the white waiting room. Well, that worked okay until they got to North Carolina. They were pulled off the bus and beaten and put on the chain gang. The organizers, James Farmer and James Peck, decided it became too dangerous, so they called the ride off. It wasn't until 14 years later, the South still had not changed its custom. But James Farmer and James Peck decided to do it again. They created another freedom ride. They departed Washington, D.C. on May 4, 1961 on 2 buses. One bus took the route through Birmingham, Alabama. The second bus took the route through Anniston, Alabama. The bus that arrived in Birmingham, Alabama, the freedom riders were pulled off the bus and beaten. The bus that arrived in Anniston, Alabama, was fireborne, and the freedom riders barely got out alive. They barely got out alive. James Farmer and James Peck once again called it off, said it was too dangerous. It's just too dangerous. But there were students in Nashville, Tennessee, who said that the riots couldn't end. They shouldn't end. If the riots ended, then the segregationists had won. So they boarded buses in Anniston and in Birmingham, Alabama, and headed into Jackson, Mississippi. I was a student at Tuckerville College, 10 miles away at that particular time, and we had, as students, had been watching their progress. 2 days earlier, the governor of the state of Mississippi came on TV and said, all of my Negroes are happy with their condition in Mississippi. Students at Tuckerville College were looking for ways to let the governor know that he was wrong. 2 days after the Freedom Riders came into Jackson, after they were marched out of the bus through the white waiting room in the bus station, out the back door, and into a paddy wagon and into jail. Okay. 2 days after that, young man named by the name of James Bevel and another one, Bernard Lafayette, came to Tuckerville College, and we had a meeting that night. And we were looking for ways to help the Freedom Riders, because I tell you, we really thought that they would be killed. Now, these people, the freedom riders, were able to face beating and jail and possibly death in order to continue the rise. The government and the powers in Mississippi called them outside agitators. The Klan and John Wright, the head of the White Citizen Council, declared Mississippi is ready. At the same time, white Mississippi officials were informing the Justice Department that all of the riders would be killed if they came to Mississippi. We at Tougaloo College, we as a body, were not going to let that happen without a fight. What John Wright didn't know was that the Tougaloo chaplain, Ed King, and the Tougaloo Four was also ready. In 1961, when the Freedom Riders came to Jackson, Mississippi, had a meeting 2 nights afterwards. There were 4 people who decided that the only thing that we could do to help the Freedom Riders while in jail there, possibly saving their life, was to get into jail with them. We felt that the state of Mississippi would not kill residents of the state of Mississippi as quickly unless we did not get in there with them. We thought the Freedom Riders would actually be killed because of our jail system. Once you went into our prison system and so forth, you never came out the same way, same condition that you went in there with. Okay, so we felt if we got in, they wouldn't kill us all, and so that was the reason for the Tougaloo Four to make that attempt to get into jail with them. 3 people at Tougaloo College volunteered to be arrested as a Freedom Rider. Myself and the 2 individuals at the bottom row, Eleanor Price and her brother, Ross Price. The 3rd person that volunteered changed their mind the night before. And Mayor Harrison, top right, classmate, decided to join us. Now, 3 people out of a total student body volunteered. The other 2, Ross and Eleanor, were from nearby town of Raymond, Mississippi. June 23rd, we traveled to the 12-way bus station, where we were arrested and taken to the Jackson City Jail. After 2 days of interrogation, I was transferred to the Hinds County Jail, where I remained until I was released. But days later, 32 other Mississippi Freedom Riders, brothers and sisters, were arrested, saying that you can't do that to our brothers and sisters. Arrest me also, because Jim Crow must go. That was their slogan. It made me feel good. Of course it did. After my trial, which lasted for 1 hour at most, and filled with testimony of an array of policemen complaining of my attempt to incite violence, we were sentenced to 4 months in jail and arrested and assessed a $200 fine. My case was initially appealed to the Mississippi Hinds County Court, then up to the Supreme Court, and also turned over to the Interstate Commerce Commission. The ICC ordered segregation to be unconstitutional in all ICC-controlled facilities. The ruling removed all of the black and white signs throughout the South. You know, The librarian brought to my attention the fact that on June 6, 1961, there was something known as the Ride Toward Freedom meeting. To everyone here, I can't speak of the Freedom Riders and not mention that famous Ride Toward Freedom meeting that took place right here in Deerfield, Illinois on June 6, 61. It was the North Shore Utilitarian Church on Half Day Road that invited us, the Freedom Riders, to speak of their experiences. At that meeting, Miss Doris Casto, Jerome Smith, and Isaac Reynolds represented the Freedom Rider group. In attendance also were Janet Tangerman, Reverend Russell Bletzer, Rabbi Arnold Wolf, Mr. R. Van Leeuwen, and the congregation Soul L. That was a long time ago. Even the phone number of that event was unique. The phone number was ID 25289. You don't see those anymore. It was because of the Freedom Riders that the Interstate Commerce Commission ordered all of those colored and white signs to be removed. Young people in the audience today, it was because of the Freedom Riders that while in the South, you don't have to drink from separate water fountains. You don't have to sit at the back of the bus. It was because of the Freedom Riders that you can now sit at a lunch counter in downtown southern cities in an interracial group. The Freedom Riders, write it down. During those turbulent times, often a classmate and I would walk the desolate streets of small towns of South Mississippi, seeking to provide residents with the knowledge of the Mississippi Constitution and the entire voter registration process. On occasion, Blacks would usher us out of their homes and out of their town for our own safety. We've been sent through the back doors of meeting places in the midst of night because in the word had come down that, quote unquote, the other folks were searching for us. Many people were abused, some died while trying to secure your right to vote. There are things that can be done. You may ask, what can you do? You can arrange to encourage the end of wars. It has been said that the cost of the Mid-Eastern War reached $800 billion, enough to double the salary of every teacher in America. With what it costs to keep people in prison, we could eliminate tuition in every college in America. You can also talk to your young people, young men and women who don't know where they came from and are allowing a corrupt system to determine where they're going. Systemic failure. If you don't think it's happening, follow your student advocate for one day. Those are your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, your nieces and nephews. Where were you at the last teachers' meeting? Where were you at the last PTA meeting? The last student evaluation conference? Where were you? We must create a system whereby the mistakes of our youth do not prohibit them from using the ballot box or condemn them for life. Mass incarceration is about race. We know that Blacks are disproportionately incarcerated. Our criminal justice system is notorious for its institutionalized racial bias. Alternative for incarceration for nonviolent crimes should not be a partisan issue. The responsibility is ours. What will we do? We need commitment. Therefore, don't forget your own power. Please wear your masks and maintain social distances from others when in public. Please follow the CDC guidelines when they are given. Students here, you have the tools to make this world a better place. During your daily travels, take a look around you. If you see something in your school, your community, your state, your country that is not right, that's where you should go to fight that particular problem. You can follow in the footsteps of my friends, the Sims, and do whatever you can to make sure no child spend a hungry day in any nearby school. If there is not equal opportunity in education or the economic arena, that is where you should go. If equal housing is not a given in your state, that's where you should go. We need to put up a great fight to make health and education a constitutional right for every American. The healthier we are, the better educated we are, the better America becomes. Better America becomes. Ladies and gentlemen, racism is as old as America. It's cloaked in the bosom of inequality, privilege, oppression, and the suffering of one group at the hand of another group. Racism is a sanctuary for the stupid and the ignorant. Racism seeks to divide and destroy. It is the enemy of justice and goodwill. So don't fall for that trap. All of you have within you the light of hope and the light of freedom. Shine that light on the scourge of racism. You need to let that light shine all over your city, all over your state, all over America and the world. Go where the problems are. March into the tomorrow of hope. You need to challenge old racist segregation strategy wherever you find it. That old strategy is to divide and conquer. Divide by hate, race, fear, and propaganda and lies. We have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do. Sometime we must think, what would Martin say? I think Martin Luther King would say to you today. I think Martin Luther King would say to you today that the common good should be the center of all of our public policy. He would say that your generation that is creating a new movement. So let your movement be a movement of the common good. Martin Luther King would tell you that you have the talent. And if your talent is writing, research and write stories of hope. If your talent is speaking, speak the truth as you know it and spread the words of hope. You can, with your talent, create an atmosphere in your school, young people, that is moral, that is fair, and that is just. Martin Luther King would encourage you to join like-minded organizations. People, the choice is ours. We control our choices. You here today, you have to fight for peace and justice. I want you to keep fighting, keep on fighting. I'm going to slow things down a bit and show you a number of images from the movement. They say that a picture is worth 1,000 words. It was James Bevel, one of Martin Luther King lieutenants, that raised the bar of hope by lowering the participation age. Eli Hostetler, roommate, Goshen, Indiana. Eli paid a tremendous price for his involvement in the civil rights movement. He was beaten several times in jail by inmates simply because he participated in the movement in trying to help people register to vote. During the peaceful protests Police would let dogs tear your clothes off. There were two dogs that they used in Jackson, Mississippi, and they were known as Happy and Rebel. The ironic thing about those two dogs is that they were trained by a gentleman whose last name was Nara. Nara in Germany trained dogs to protect Hitler's airport. That was very ironic if we saw it. One day, Mrs. Eileen Quinn arrived at the governor's mansion to protest the seating of congressmen from districts where blacks were not allowed to vote. She had her children with her, two of her children with her, carrying small flags. Ladies and gentlemen, if only you and I had the courage of Mrs. Quinn's 8-year-old son, Anthony, the world would be a better place. 1961. I was asked, along with a classmate of mine, to travel to Macomb, Mississippi to pick up freedom riders that was coming into Macomb from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. As customary, when we would do that, we would meet with the chief of police of that particular town and ask for his protection, okay, for the freedom riders and for ourselves too, as we requested it. That was never hardly granted, okay? That was never hardly granted. Now, young man, my schoolmate, MacArthur Cotton, and I met with the chief of police, they call him Captain George Guy, whose office was 1/2 block from the station, the bus terminal. And as about 1:30 p.m., as the bus rounded the corner, Captain George Guy, MacArthur Cotton, and myself left his office and walked the 1/2 block to the bus station. As the bus arrived, 6 freedom riders departed the bus, entered the station. I stayed outside to monitor the situation there. Chief of police went into the pool hall across the street. The freedom riders were in there approximately 4 to 5 minutes when doors of the local business establishments around that station on that block opened, and people just flooded out with bricks, bats, stones, and anything else that I didn't know about. And they came out of those establishments and went toward 3 Time Life photographers who were 3 doors down from the station. They beat them unmercifully, and when they got tired of beating them, they picked them up and threw them through the plate glass windows of the nearby store. Seeing all of that, I notified the freedom riders inside the station that it's time for us to leave, that we should leave. Things are getting out of hand outside. We came out into the crowd, and to our surprise, the chief of police, George Guy, had come out of the pool hall and came to the entrance of the station and provided a pathway for us through the mob. And he did that by firing his weapon in the air 3 or 4 times. So we were able to get out of there and to escape. Later that evening, Mac and I attended a mass meeting in Macomb. We were trying to add more energy to the voter registration cause. We left the mass meeting for the train station to try and get back to school at Tougaloo. However, there was no train leaving that time of night, but we were able to get on a bus that was parked outside of the bus station in the back. And we were directed there by a gentleman. I guess he was the protector of the station itself. He said, you can go and sit on the bus and wait till tomorrow morning. And that's what we did. and we put our fingerprints on all the windows of the bus. And we did that simply because we wanted anyone, in case we were killed, to know that we did get on that particular bus. Macomb, Mississippi was known as the bumming capital of the USA. During a 32-day period, there were 16 bummings. Okay. As a community organizer there, I can tell you that it was difficult to operate. Imagine how you would function in an atmosphere where you didn't know if your house was going to be blown up before you awakened. We had to talk to people who experienced this and request that they hold on one more day. Hold on. Better times are coming, but you have to hold on. What if you were working in Macomb, Mississippi? Could you function effectively? While the people's homes and communities were being bombed, could you continue to beg them to hold on just a little while longer? The student activists working out of Tuckerton College, as well as many other activists in Mississippi, could, and they did do it. So you have no excuse for failure. Students here, imagine how you would attend school and study knowing that a bomb was going to explode somewhere in your neighborhood. How would you go about your daily routine knowing that bombs would be exploding in any moment? People of Macomb, Mississippi did it. Mrs. Eileen Quinn did it. 2 of her buildings were blown to bits. Miss Willie Mae Cotton in Macomb did it. Miss Cotton shielded us many times from adversity by allowing freedom fighters shelter in her home. She did it for her efforts. Her home was blown to bits. How would you function in that situation? Young people, what is your excuse for not doing the best that you can do in school? There are going to be tough times ahead. Society is going to require all of your efforts in order to navigate properly. Some of you are not doing the best in school. What is your excuse? Are the lessons too difficult? Are you hungry? Are you being treated unfairly? Is more pressure being put on you than on others? Some of you are involved in things that you shouldn't be involved in. You can do better. You must do better. You have no choice. You have no choice. Do better or get left behind.
So Thomas, I'm going to step in now. You asked me to interrupt you at 7:30. It is now 7:45. I couldn't stop you. Everything, what you were talking about was way too impactful. So thank you.
Thank you. And to all of you here, when you awaken tomorrow morning, take a look in the mirror and with sincerity, look directly in your own eyes and ask yourself 2 questions. Who am I and why am I here on earth? You don't have to give an answer, but when the opportunity presents itself for you to contribute to the goodness of mankind, let the question surface. Always remember that you are the captain of your soul. You carry the power. We can change things, you and me, if we believe in ourselves, if we walk in peace, if we live in not within lies, but in compassion. If we lift up our brothers and sisters, we can change the world. Peace is just around the corner. Let us go forward and find it together. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. That was just, yeah, I think a lot of us are probably speechless right now. If you do have a question, please go ahead and put that in the chat and we will get to those. Let's see, we do have Joan C. wanted to say, let's see, my chat just bumped away here. 1 second. Joan C. wanted to say hello, a fellow freedom writer. She's listening from West Virginia. I think she had to step out for another meeting, but she wanted to let you know that she was here and listening.
Okay, yeah. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, thank you so much. Thank all of you for working. Yes.
Yeah. Taritha wanted to say, we come from a long line of civil rights fighters. Thank you for writing your story and sharing it with all of us. And
Okay.
I had a question. We were talking a little bit earlier before we started about parenthood, and I thought your take on your family was interesting. And did your parents deal with your involvement differently? Did each one of them feel differently about your involvement with the civil rights movement?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite get your question.
So your mom and dad both felt a little differently about your role in the civil rights movement.
Yes,
Can
yes.
you, yeah,
I
can you talk about that a little bit?
yes, I decided to, as I stated, I became involved in the civil rights movement while in college, you see, and so I was away from home. Actually, I lived 60 miles from the college, and but anyway, and I came home one weekend and let my mom and dad know what I was doing, and my mom gave me, and actually, she gave me all the encouragement she could. She said, your mother was the your mother is a Christian, your grandmother was a Christian. I think your great grandmother was a Christian. But anyway, nothing is going to happen to you out there. So keep on pushing. Okay. Dad looked at me and said, they're going to kill you, boy. But yeah, it was quite different. I found out years later that my mom was very concerned. She was very fearful of my being out there. What I took to doing a lot of times when after a demonstration that was broadcast, maybe on TV or something on the radio, I would call home, let my mom know that I was okay, and let her know. I said, Mom, it happened again. You said nothing was going to happen. I made it through. So we had a close relationship, my family, and they gave me much encouragement. I couldn't have made it without them.
Nice. Since your move to Illinois, did you notice any differences or changes with racism and inequality amongst Black people?
Okay, do that again.
Since your move to Illinois, did you notice any differences or changes with racism and inequality amongst Black people?
Yeah, there's a lot of difference. There's a lot of difference. In the South during the 60s, racism it was more overt. It was out there. Caucasian didn't mind letting you know they didn't like you. Okay, they hated you, didn't want you there, wanted you to disappear. Period. All right. Here is undercover. Okay, it's hidden almost. A lot of a lot of people that I talk to, until an opportune moment or something like that, you may not know that they were racist. Okay, because they try to hide it. They try to hide it instead of being sincere. And however, not all of them. Now, don't get me wrong. And because even myself, we have what we call um, bias and racism little get-togethers. It's 5 or 6 people, and we get together and we talk about biases and we talk about racism, and we bring others in slowly, but we bring others in and to deal with it. And you can talk about it. Racism, you can talk about it as long as you don't talk down to the other party. Okay, you can talk about it. And we need more conversations on racism. Yes.
Um, so your school at Tougaloo, how did that affect, do you think you would have been a participant with the Freedom Riders if it hadn't been for that education?
uh well, I must explain one thing. I wasn't going in. My parents were not going to let me go anywhere else. They made that clear to me. 6 years earlier, my sister had gone to Tougaloo, okay, Tougaloo College, and she had graduated from there. And my dad and mom say, "You're not going anywhere else. That's where you're going." It was that factual. That's where you are going. All right. And that's where I went. That's why I went there. I'm so happy that I did. I'm so happy that I did. Tougaloo College was the only free place in the state of Mississippi. It was the only place that interracial groups could meet and have meetings and so forth without breaking the laws of Mississippi, sometimes being arrested. So, yes, it was an oasis right in the middle of hate. Coming from other parties, if you rode in on a bus, Trailway Greyhound, coming to Tougaloo, and if it was dark, after dark, the bus let you off 1/4 mile from the campus. And if you lived within that 1/4 mile, every once in a while, like every time the bus lets somebody out, you see somebody running to get through the gates of the campus. and you did, because sometimes we had problems navigating that 1/4 mile to campus, people in cars passing by and harassing you and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, Tougaloo was a great place to be.
And then another question, why did you not speak about your involvement in the civil rights for many, many years?
It's difficult. It's difficult to believe, first of all, that people can be so hateful, okay, for no reason. For no reason at all. People can be terrible. They can be terrible. And during our particular times, we educated ourselves to the problems that were at hand. Many of our demonstrations, we knew why we were demonstrating and what we were demonstrating for. Okay, we demonstrated for jobs against many of the establishments in the city of Jackson, Mississippi. They would not hire blacks in those jobs. So yes, we protested against them. And if you walking out there on the protest line, you didn't know what was going to happen to you. Ballers would come out of cars as they passed by. Anything could happen to you. That's why I said we didn't know a lot of times. We would have those little song and prayer sessions before we went on events like that, because we knew that we felt that something might happen to us before we got back. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of people that just want to say thank you. You have some fans out there. Uncle Thomas, good to see you healthy and full of energy.
Hey. Yeah. And I see somebody in the corner up there. Who is that?
That we have, it's another one of your logins. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what happened right there. You have another.
Hi, Mr. Armstrong. We had spoke earlier. I'm Kaviria.
Who is this?
Kaviria.
Oh yeah. How you doing?
Yes, I'm doing all right.
You doing okay? Good. So
Yes.
glad you're able to make it.
I am too. Thank you so much for the invite. I really am very grateful for this.
Okay, good. Yeah. We'll discuss it.
Yes, definitely.
Oh, yes, indeed. Great.
So I don't see any more questions, just great presentation. Suzanne wanted to say, I'm proud to have known you. We worked together at Chicago TMO.
Suzanne, mate, how you doing, girl? All right.
I love it.
Thank you.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't see any more questions. We have another fan, Rhonda, your cousin.
Oh, yeah.
Great presentation.
Yeah, I know. She keeps me straight. Rhonda does.
Awesome. I love it. I
You
love
know?
when we get some family members in with our presenters and sometimes they have little tidbits to share, but
Oh, yeah.
that,
You don't
so
want to hear.
I was going to say, yeah, we're just about to wrap things up here. So it's almost 8 o'clock. So I'm going to share my screen really quick just to let everyone know about a couple programs that we have coming up in the coming weeks.
Okay.
Some things we're pretty excited about. We've been pretty busy with programs lately. So next week, if you're kind of into science and nature and technology, this is a great program for you. Biomimicry, May 4th at 6:30. If you don't know what that is, well, come to the program. You'll find out. And then for our book club, we're reading Saving Ruby King. That is going to be, that's an afternoon book discussion. That's on May 13th at 1. We do have books in the library, and that's available as an ebook as well. And then coming up, that's actually on May 12th, the Chicago Architecture River Tour. That it sounds like you're going to be on the boat. It's actually a virtual tour, but there's a lot of history and things like that that's going to be involved. That's going to be really fun.
Good.
So please join us for one of those. Anyway, I want to say thank you, Thomas.
And Ruby King, Catherine Ardell, West.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
All right.
It's going to be a good one. So,
Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
all right.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. Yes.
All right. Have a good night.
You too. Take care.
Thanks. You too.
Bye-bye.